Thank you. And thank you to be here. I was just what Vanessa just said. The voice of people is so important that I don't know what you feel, but reading this G20 communique, which is pretty disappointing. But you see that the voice of the people, the voice of the citizen is being to make a difference because leaders from all over the world are paying attention and are concerned about how citizens is seeing their lack of, in a way, engagement and delivery. So I think it's a crucial moment just to continue pressuring, and in a way that's the only solution I see to make things done. While we celebrate these first steps drawn by a lot of citizens in our COP world, I think it's really important to stress the key roles played by all the citizens, the widespread mobilization on a global connected youth movement, frustrated with climate action. I'm really doing this job of trying to push climate agenda everywhere I can since I don't even remember the number of years, maybe more than 30. So I think that the youth movement is probably the best news we have for climate action from now very long. So this generation is generation of new commitments that have really seeking innovative way to respond to the crisis and looking for alternatives. So that's really important. But of course, it's not enough to thank them and tell them that they inspire us. They should be given a seat at the table. Actually, today in Glasgow, we should look around us and see who is missing, who is not invited, who is not talking. We should really be who has to be in the decision circle. And you know, now more and more you see a number of powerful people, business, financial leaders, but that's finally not the ones who are so important to be in the decision circle. And in a way, if the more vulnerable countries, citizens, are not represented, of course the consensus will be always too weak. And so that's why it's important to create the decision circle in a much broader sense. I think climate assemblies can help us channel and tap democratic potential on our societies towards climate decision making. Citizens in 2021 have many more resources, capabilities, and interests in participating in political life in a broad sense. The interest from citizens but also policymakers is stressed by what the OECD has called a deliberative wave of new assemblies, consensus conferences, and citizen dialogues that has been established in many, many places across the globe. I was a direct witness as I have the privilege to chair the French Citizen Assembly for Citizens for the Climate Law. It has offered, for me, Paris Agreement was of course a big moment of my life. But I can say that the Citizen Assembly was another very big event of my life, because it offers a strong denial to the prejudice that citizens no longer have an interest in public affairs. You listen many times, the leaders say, oh, the citizen doesn't trust the public institutions, the democratic institutions, their representatives, their members of parliament, their governments. But you know what? Most of the time, political leaders doesn't trust the people. That's the problem, more than the other way around. And these 150 members express a clear message that all citizens should be able to turn into engineers of change, and not just voters. They have agency, or recipient of climate policies. So bringing citizens into COPs for me makes a lot of sense to foster ambition and strong action. Many political systems across the world operate with institutions and processes that struggle to grasp the complexity and difficulties of climate change. And I can tell most of the time, if you leave the governments where they are with a representative institution as they are, most of the time, they don't make the political space for other voices to be listened to. And that's very important because we need a huge change in societies. And so the vested interest organized around the governments and the pressure would always argue for delaying action. And they are powerful and they have a lot of resources. So that's why we have to, in a way, enlarge the decision circle. So the citizen perspective of the common threat of climate change is all the more important that they can be free of power politics and other obstacles, in particular the vested interest, getting in the way of negotiation and ambition. And you know, you citizen, us citizen, we have gone to the courts and we want judgment, including in my own continent in Europe. The citizen want judgment in favor of climate action against government in, for example, now Netherlands, Germany, France. I know that in Africa, Asia, Latin America, there are many more citizens, in a way, going to courts, for example. And when the role of citizens would be so important to really make the governments and the private sector and the financial actors that, in a way, are boasting that they are doing things, we have to make them accountable. And the credibility of all the process is depending on the seriousness of the action. So that's the role of citizen. Outside pressure is really, in my view, the only way to get there. When I saw the proposal of the Global Assembly, I felt very happy to see the recognition of the Paris Agreement as a framework. And I have to say this comes as a relief. We need to make this work. It's the only chance we have. I support for the UN with expectation for it to be strict and act as a coordinator for different levels. This is a welcome signal because we need to avoid the clubs of the richer country or the more polluting countries altogether. So we need everyone in the circle. I like the relevant and strategic policy identify already shifting financial support from fossil fuel to clean energy, improving energy efficiency, carbon taxes, tackling issues of overpopulation and overconsumption, as Bob said earlier. I find central that equity and fairness is at the center of the document. No coincidence if the Global Assembly is making such a focus on equity and fairness. I think everywhere now we need the changes. That will be difficult and long. So all the changes have to come with a fairness and equity focus. In Europe, it's the main question now about the implementation of the Green Deal. At local, regional, and national levels, we are taking unprecedented steps towards transition. So to implement this, we need more ownership. Policies cannot be top-down. They will never make the change. And as I told before, they will be always captured by many, many interests. So we need the involvement of citizens to define the social conditions that really can really accurately work the path to the transition to net zero. Important that the frame of the COP, but also in the minds of citizens, we do not forget that the transition should not be about the calculation of avoiding tons of carbon. We are not talking about carbon tons. It's about people. As Vanessa said earlier, it's about generating new social pact, new social contract for our society driven by equity and justice. And finally, I found the relation with nature was so important in the document, which I appreciate enormously. A common ground is found with the French Climate Convention as a codification and enforcement of ecocide. We should hear this call and connect it also to the works of the biodiversity COPs, and maybe create space where we can work on the interconnected issue of the ecological crisis as a whole. It's not only climate, it's ocean, it's biodiversity. And I listening to Antonio Guterres earlier. He said exactly that. We are killing nature, but we'll disappear as a species. So citizens are I don't see any other forces, frankly. A lot can be done. Some governments want to do good. There are even business that can do good, but if there is no pressure of the citizen and no ownership of the change, this change cannot happen. Thank you.